Hi, everyone, and welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here, your brother from another mother, bringing you insights for your healing and freedom journey, especially when it comes to mental, emotional, and relationship health. I'm also the author of the book, The OCD Healing Journey, which is available now, getting to the heart of our obsessive and compulsive struggles. This comes out of my own journey of working and navigating through the battleground of obsessive compulsive issues, and those I've been able to help in their own journey. Today, what I want to do is I want to address a question and address the area of health OCD. Of course, OCD can branch out into so many areas. I feel that it's limitless in where it can go. But one of the common areas it can go into, and it affects a lot of people today in various avenues, in a whole spectrum of what it impacts in health OCD, specifically over your health, over disease, over illness, having this sense of fear surrounding getting sick or something happening to you or in that kind of arena. And to be honest, I think all of us could use some good teaching and insight to help us navigate this area. I don't think it's just for those that can be clearly seen as obsessive compulsive. I think the fear of disease, fear of something happening to you affects a lot of people if they're really honest. And we see the growing work of fear, and I want to speak into this in a way that will help you navigate this with greater effectiveness in your life and in your own journey. So let's look at the question that was sent in. I'll comment on this because what I like to do is help look at what people are sharing, get more to the heart of it, and help us get to the root system of what influences the battles that we face. Of course, in my book, The OCD Healing Journey, there's a lot of getting to the heart of it. What's really going on and how you relate to your thoughts. I talk about the problem is not the problem. It's how you relate to God, yourself, the world around you, and how you relate to your thoughts that needs healing. And so let's get right into this question. I'm reaching out because I've been having an ongoing battle with health OCD. I'm not sure when it started, but I think it started sometime in elementary school. My mom had a health book that had symptoms, and my curious self opened it up. I think that's when it happened. Now, many people who struggle with OCD often look for when did it start, but when they look for when it started, they often say OCD just punched out of nowhere. And really, in reality, there's some underpinnings to OCD and perfectionism, control, our response to fear, how we relate to our emotions, how we relate to disturbance within, our sense of doubt and uncertainty, how we relate to that. It flares up, and we feel like that's when it started, but really it often starts even earlier. I know we're talking about elementary school, so this is early on in life where your relationship to health brings about. Now, I don't know what's happening with you at this age as a child, what's going on with your parents, your family, the dynamics of your thoughts. I know for me, in this kind of situation, I would be alone in my thoughts. When I was a kid, you didn't think of expressing struggles you went through or expressing a disturbing thought you had. And if you did express a disturbing thought, then be like, just don't worry about it, whatever, and you're often kind of left alone in navigating through this. So anyways, nonetheless, my mom, let me skip down. I think that's when it happened. Anyways, over time, whenever I had a health issue, like getting sick, I would immediately go to Google to look up my symptoms. And of course, as many of you know, when you look up symptoms in Google, somehow it's going to lead to cancer. Everything kind of leads to cancer. You have a cough or something or this, and somewhere in there you end up at cancer, right? And it often causes you to spin out even worse. There's not a person that I know that hasn't at some point in their journey looked up Google for their symptoms. And yes, Google, if you're listening, because you probably are, yes, you lead everybody to cancer, and you just add to the fear factor. Even if I went to the doctor and they said I was fine, I sometimes would doubt. Now, with health OCD, there's two responses that we can often have in fight or flight. One of them is the fight response of going to the doctor too much. Then there's the flight response, the avoidance response, which is avoiding going to doctors. You went to the doctor, they said you're fine, But sometimes I would doubt. So you see here that when OCD is at work, anxiety, fear is a heavy presence. So even rational feedback of "you're fine" doesn't help. And then you see the rise of doubt. OCDers have a very disempowering relationship with doubt and uncertainty. They hyperanalyze it, they narrow in on it, they magnify doubt and uncertainty, they reveal it as a major problem. This has to be addressed, and they try to address it with finding absolute certainty. But even when they get feedback from people, it's not enough. There's always a response, yeah, but what if? Yeah, but what if? Yeah, but what if? I talk about that in the distortions, and you can get that in the OCD healing journey. And so during COVID, this is a whole area that I think is important to understand too. It got really bad, right? I had controlling tendencies with my family about it. After getting COVID, I then would spiral and wonder, did I wash my hands, wear my mask, etc. The spinning. I'll get to the COVID experience and the worldwide impact that had in just a second, just to share a few things that are helpful for working through it, navigating through this. Anyways, I want to be delivered from this. I'm tired of feeling anxiety anytime any sick symptoms come. The cry of OCDers is, and anxiety sufferers, get this anxiety off of me. I just want it to go away. But we have to realize it's a journey we're going to have to walk through. This isn't a snap your fingers, find the magic formula, it's going to go away. It's actually walking through this. You say, I'm tired of feeling anxiety. Now, some of that is you being hard on yourself and a poor relationship with yourself. But if you feel this feeling, I am sick and tired, I am tired of, that needs to be a signal to invite us that the way I am approaching things needs relearning and needs adjusting, needs change. Because many times we say, I'm sick of this, and we just spin in the I'm sick of this. And then we can go into self-loathing, self-pity, and that's not helpful. That's not a loving response to yourself. Victim thinking, self-pity, self-loathing is actually an attack on yourself. That's self-hating, even though we go to it quite often in our spiral. I'm not saying you are. I'm just kind of speaking to that for all of us in our journey. I'm tired of feeling this anxiety. Anytime the sick symptom comes, I want to trust that God has everything in control. He knows the plans for my life. Now, for Christians, we often go to that. I want to just trust God and just know what we want, that like result. I just want to trust. We don't realize navigating trust, navigating our relationship with fear needs a journey of relearning. So what I'd like to do for a moment is use this subject to take a step back, and all of us can ask a few questions. I'd like to ask you, the person writing this question, and all of us in general, what is your relationship with sickness, health, and healing? Have you ever had anyone ask you that? If I was to bring up this, if I started talking about cancer, what would be your response? Would it be fight or flight? Would it be curious learning? Would it be sober learning and empowerment? Would it create just a lot of anxiousness in you, worry, rumination, spiraling? Would you want to get out of that? As if you saw a button that talked about cancer in a YouTube video, would you jump out of it as quickly as possible? So let's go further. How did your parents respond to you being sick? This is an interesting question, because this often formulates our relationship to nurture, our relationship to comfort, our relationship to not being well. Many people, when they get sick, they get so angry and irritated. They want to get out of bed as quickly as possible. I got to get to work, right? You have a very, sickness almost has to like pull you down to get you to stop. And because it brings out your references. But how did your parents respond to you being sick growing up? Was it cold? Were you ignored and neglected emotionally? There's two kinds of care that we need. One is physical care. Get rest, get some proper nutrients, get recovery. But then there's emotional care of how your parents respond to you being sick. Did you watch them spinning and they're emotionally spinning over you being sick because they spin over themselves being sick? They spin all the time. Did you notice in your generations there's a transference? Is that the right word? A handoff of the where there's a handing of the baton of a obsessive, spinning, ruminating, fearful, phobic kind of relationship to sickness, illness, and disease? Were you neglected of basic care and nurturing health? Were you taught healthy habits and how to not be afraid of disease? Because the reality is we need to be taught, and there's a lack of fundamental education in how to empower your immune system. We tend to have a very fearful relationship. We want to bubble ourselves, and we don't realize that actually there's ways we can strengthen our immune system, our God-given immune system, to actually do its job. Or maybe when you were sick, you were yelled at that you need to have more faith or something like that. Many people have said that. You need to have more faith and believe, get up and fight through it. Both my parents, I watched them growing up, no matter how sick they were, they dragged themselves out of bed. And I gotta get. I'm like, I remember as a kid going, what are you doing? You have sick days. Get better. Bless God. I'm going to go out there. This is not, and there's even times where I go, this is not healthy for me to observe. And they'd have racked up sick days they'd never used. Appreciate the hard work, but there was this went to an extreme of never taking the time to say, my body needs to recover. Something's going on here and I need to nurture it in a healthy way to help it recover and get strength back. Did your parents, now I bring this up because I think this is, regardless of your perspective on healing, whether as a Christian you believe in healing or you don't, or you're somewhere in between or whatever, did your parents pray for you when you were sick? I mean, many people say, I don't remember my parents praying for me at all. But did your parents pray for you? Was there a prayerful response? Again, all these things develop. I'm getting to not only your relationship with health, healing, disease, I'm also getting to your relationship with nurture and fear. Because these kind of questions also get to the underpinnings of how do you relate to when you have uncertainty? Because disease is a very uncertain subject. Will I get it? Will I not get it? And many people say, well, don't say that. Don't say you might get it or you don't know. You don't have enough faith. Don't say those words. Pull those words back. And it's many times that intense faith kind of practice, which I think it's like a fear faith in the form of faith. It's afraid. You're activating faith, but it's in a fear-based kind. Don't say those words. Don't say those words, right? And they say that in the name of faith, that it tries to create this sense of control and certainty around our life. I'm going to control every detail and every avenue. Creates even a superstitious kind of perspective regarding sickness and disease. So anyways, just a question to ask. How'd your parents respond to you being sick? Did they take time to pray for you? I remember a couple moments where when I was sick, being prayed for by my parents and having a noticeable effect on how I felt. And there were just a couple memories that I have. And I think when my kids are not feeling well, I want them to see the power of prayer, that I'm praying for them, and that the response to uncertain moments or vulnerable moments is that we connect to God in that. I believe Psalm 91 to be a very powerful, I did a whole video on that. You can check that out, Psalm 91. There's a picture of he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I'll say of the Lord, he is my fortress. There's a place where he's a rock, a protection, a place where we can abide. It's all nurture. It's all nurture. But if we're not taught nurture, when the storm rises up, we panic. And when we panic, we lose rationale. We lose our ability to focus on what's at hand. And believers need to be equipped in how they relate to their fears. And it often goes back to our fundamental experiences. Was a parent or both parents sick often, leaving them unavailable to nurture you? Some people, when I asked them, tell me about your parents. And they were like, well, they were disabled, or they were addicts, or they were constantly depressed and out of the game and disconnected. Mom was in bed all day, or dad was never around because he was lost in his problems and his struggle. This left a lack of nurture. See, now I'm getting to the foundation. We think, well, this health OCD, that's it. No, that's not it. It's how we relate to our thoughts And in this question that was sent in to me and many others, it just happened to find that avenue of vulnerability to highlight that doubt. And now that becomes a topic that threatens you. Did you have a death of a loved one? Because that's another question we can ask. Would you have a lot of loss? Did you lose a parent? Did you lose a loved one? And many times death can spring, it can be a somewhat even a traumatic experience that creates a heavy response of fear on your life. Were you able to process loss in a healthy way, to realize our vulnerability as humans? And we don't fix that vulnerability with heavy control. We fix that, we don't fix the vulnerability, but we heal the vulnerability through surrender, through understanding, hey, I can't fix all this. I embrace my humanity. I embrace the vulnerability. And there's actually great freedom in facing our fears in that. Were you in your upbringing taught the world is a very, very scary place? The world is very, very scary, and you better watch out and look around every corner because that kind of narrative then conditions us to look for any possibility of fear, magnify it, and focus in on it. And I know for me, I had to relearn how to relate to fear and how I had this constant thought process of I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe. And a lot of it had to do with how I related to the world around me, but also what was cultivated in my own heart and life as far as emotional safety, which leads me to this question. What was the way that you felt loved and safe growing up? Because for OCDers, we have to learn to connect to the power of unconditional love from God, which empowers us to face our fears because we learn to experience his love through facing fears. Now, with OCD and health OCD and all OCD, we have to realize fear is a major driving force. It propels a phobic level of fear where very specific things are highlighted as massive dangers. They are overblown. Now, here's something that you must understand. And this makes my work very challenging, not just in people I help, materials I produce, and answering questions, but even in everyday interactions with people. You can tell when fear is in high operation in someone's life. And when it is, giving rational, helpful feedback, logic, or even facts, it doesn't get taken in. Logic can often get rejected. You have to realize that when fear is in operation and we don't do business with our fears, we defend our fears. We defend them. We get mad if other people don't validate our fears. You say, you better do this or else you could get a disease tomorrow. And someone doesn't feed that fear, you get upset. What is wrong with you? You're uncaring. And that is one of the biggest challenges in navigating a world that is growing in fear. The news thrives off of you being afraid. Social media thrives off of you being afraid. The world system thrives off of people being afraid because fear will create a manipulative move to our action and to our perspectives. The more we feed the fear, the more it grows, and then that begins to dictate our life. So early on in my journey, in walking a healing and freedom journey, I had to shift and change my relationship with fear, anxiety, panic, phobias, obsessiveness, rumination, worry, all that stuff. And it's what formed the book, I Will Not Fear. And it is a fundamental area that we have to learn to work through because it's our relationship with fear that creates a massive problem. Now, for the world, we experienced this global trauma of COVID that took place. And there's something, without getting into all the arguments and all of that, because I'm not about arguing anyways, I want to get right to the heart of things that took place and are taking place. And I said it in the midst of it for many, many months, is what that global trauma did was it increased the fear factor. It increased people listening to fear, serving fear. Two areas that I want to bring out. Number one, there's a sudden upheaval in our lives where everything's changing. There's lockdowns and things like that going on. So it hit people. Whoa, right? But within that, having a lockdown life magnifies fear. And your body does not thrive in being in a lockdown world. So for many people, it magnified fears that were already in place, shook them up, and now it brought fear to a whole new level. And so there's a great deal of avoidance. Now we are afraid of any sense of disease or illness. And so too, in the headlines, in the news, in the interaction, fear was a constant barrage hitting people, death counts constantly on the screen, fear, 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 fear. Meanwhile, we were not being taught sober ways to strengthen our immune systems. Make sure you're getting plenty of sun. Make sure you're getting exercise. Make sure you stay connected relationally. Eat better foods. If you notice that none of that was said, fear went in and it goes to certain areas that made us lose rationale and how to have a healthy, cultivated physical, mental, emotional life in our journey. And so when fear takes over, it gains the headlines. And so people weren't taught. People are not taught. I wasn't taught how to strengthen my immune system. I had to learn there are foods, there is a lifestyle I can live that actually strengthens my immune system. That right now, my immune system can be fighting off things I don't even know about. Right now could be fighting off diseases. Right now, fighting off invaders, doing its job. And I want to encourage that and support that. And what was very helpful in my journey is realizing how much fear, anxiety, and stress compromises my immune system. So if I live in that fear kind of environment, I am actually weakening the very system God designed in my body to fight off. And so I realize if I'm worrying about disease, I'm going to fear and I'm going to follow pathways that are just going to isolate me. People are going to be afraid of dirt, afraid of germs, afraid of this and that, when your body actually needs a certain level of being around things so that it does its job and it gets stronger. Our kids need strong immune systems. They need to be taught how to face fear, how to navigate through that. We need to support that. We need to learn. And so the journey of working and navigating through health OCD actually involves having a different relationship with fear because we have been bombarded, owned, and hypnotized by fear. So if you're going to navigate and work through this, some feedback I want to give you is something I cannot skip over. You're going to have to recognize this is an OCD issue that needs to be worked through. Why do I say this? Because otherwise you will defend it and get angry as to why other people are not following along with your obsessive control issues over disease and you wanting to live a bubbled life when that is actually not the solution to health, wholeness, and disease. It's not, even though we're being told that in many different ways. So I can't talk to someone about health who has not recognized they have anxiety or OCD about it, because they'll get angry. They'll get defensive. So for those of you that deal with somebody on that, don't bother arguing with them about it. It's useless. In fact, it's useless arguing with anyone who has OCD and doesn't realize they have OCD and need health, because they will defend their OCD. It's one thing to have a struggle. It's another thing to defend it. And we often defend our battlegrounds very, very easily, don't we? So once you recognize this is what it is, you have a journey ahead of you. It's not going to be a journey where you're going to get over it by next week, get through it by tomorrow. No. This is a journey of learning and relearning how you relate to fear. Because up until this point, when fear knocks, you listen to it, you give into its demands. And fear is a terrorist, and you're going to have to learn not to negotiate with terrorists anymore. You're going to have to learn to lovingly redirect yourself from fear being the boss. You may feel the fear, you may feel the anxiety, but you begin to walk in a new direction. Fear, you are no longer going to be my boss. Which leads me to practically what we have to do. As the fear rises up, we have to starve our compulsions. So what's your compulsion? What do you do to compulsively try to feel better when health OCD, health anxiety starts to rise up? And usually our compulsions they're fear-based ways we react in fight or flight. In fight, we do things to try to control, And in flight, we do things to try to avoid. So some of you, right up at the jump, your compulsion is look up the symptoms. For some of you, it's excessive doctor visits. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And they're like, we've done tests, we've done this, right? Or there's so many, you avoid going to doctors, you avoid blood work, you avoid getting checkups. Where do you tend to fall in the line? Or I feel one of the biggest compulsions is just ruminating, spinning in the fear of it, spinning in the fear of it. Even though Jesus himself said in Matthew 6:27, which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? You're not adding anything to your life. In fact, with rumination, you are taking away from your life and sanity. You're digging a trench that leads to nowhere, but we spin and we spin and we spin. So if we starve the compulsion of rumination, we gently redirect ourselves to realize that's not serving my life. I've got to lovingly redirect my thoughts because that direction is harmful to me in spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. So the process is going to be learning to redirect yourself to what safety actually is. When OCD flares up, it convinces us that safety is found in solving, controlling, and getting perfect certainty over what we're afraid of. And that's not it. Safety is not a bubble. It's not a bubble. Sometimes we look at disease and we think sterilize ourselves. In fact, many people who they wash their hands with hand sanitizer. They overdo it, and they are now preventing their immune system from strengthening. I remember many years ago, I watched a episode with people with health OCD. I think it was on Oprah, and they took them out to a retreat, and they were working with them. And one of the exercises they had them do, which terrified them all, was to they were in cabins. Like retreat cabins with like wood floors. They're dusty. Whatever. Think of like the old teenage camp days, going to camp kind of floors, right? They had everyone put their hand on the floor, touch the floor, and then take their hand and put it on their mouth, on their tongue, and they were flipping out. Now, no one's encouraging, walk around and just lick your hands and lick. No one's encouraging that. But to bring out the exposure to how much anxiety has messed with us. And what frustrates me in our current health world, and whether this gets on YouTube or not, whatever, is that the emphasis for health is medication and vaccines. That's the emphasis. And we don't coach people on how to, from the inside out, in our thinking and in what we put into our body, having a strong arsenal of health in our life. And also not interacting with our world in a fear-based perspective, because fear just leads us into a constant spiral. So number 5, this leads me to, as I relearn safety, I can stand in the midst of fear, but I don't have to serve it. I can learn to take my peace one step at a time. I'm okay no matter what. And I face the fear. And this is where 1 John 4:18 comes into play. Perfect love casts out fear, but I have to learn to practice the love of God. I have to practice that I'm safe in him. Safety isn't just sitting and just, oh God, give me your love. I do that. I practice that. But I've got to every day step out and face, because in this fear factor, you've got control issues. All OCDers have control issues. I need to take everything in my own hands to keep everything safe. But what if I get a disease? And this leads to what exposure therapy often does, because what you often need is a level of, okay, if it happens, and I'll face it. And it brings up anxiety, but it's also really bringing up your control issues. I didn't realize how massive of control issues I had. It took me a long time to begin to even discover how much control I had in my life, because fear ran the show, anxiety ran the show. And so I had to get a grip on my destiny and get a grip around everything and control it. And so people will, they're afraid of cancer, or they're afraid of getting Alzheimer's, or getting some strange disease that maybe a relative have, or they have a weird symptom and they think, and during exposure, they often have to go through, okay, I have it. I have it. And then the word of faith people go, don't claim that, don't say that. And I want to say, is your don't claim it, don't say it, are you avoiding what you're afraid of? You see, when we walk right up to and go, okay, if that happens, we look at that fear right in the face, it no longer has power anymore. If it happens, it happens, and I will face. And it now takes the future and puts it where it belongs in the future. Because I cannot control what is going to happen to me in my future. And that's a myth. And Christians can tend to believe that they can control their whole destiny. The only thing you're in control of is what thought you're going to give attention to, where you're going to point your compass today. That's it. You're going to choose the emotion and the attitude that is going to serve this day in a fruitful direction and point towards faith, hope, and love, the truth that sets us free, and power, love, and a sound mind, and not all these other thoughts that are stealing. This is a fight, but it's the fight of love, of facing, standing in the fear, and you're shaking in your boots. But you don't go on the Google, and you don't go to avoiding doctors, and you don't go to endless doctor's appointments, or spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. When that rumination temptation happens, you stand in the love that God has for you and navigate through it. Because really, what's going on in you is a sense of you don't feel safe. And safety is not found in perfect certainty. Safety is found in letting go of trying to find perfect certainty and standing in the midst of that uncertainty and practicing taking your peace. I pray this blesses your life and your journey. If it does, please smash that like button. Subscribe. Go to markdejesus.com, where you'll get more information and updates on upcoming materials and broadcasts. If it's blessed your life, consider a one-time donation or become a monthly regular supporter. Be sure today, I want to recommend 2 resources. Get a copy of I Will Not Fear, because I want to help you to have a renewed relationship with fear, anxiety, stress, worry, panic, rumination, all that stuff. And also the OCD Healing Journey, a book that's available now that you can begin navigating this in a more effective way. Well, this is your brother from another mother saying, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. I'll be back with more insights and tools for your healing and freedom journey. But in the meantime, I'm out.